Throughout human history, there have been individuals who stood apart from the crowd, not because they sought attention, but because they could not bear to live in quiet submission. They are the ones who refuse to bow to unjust rules, who question dogmas that others accept without a second thought, and who reject conformity even when doing so isolates them. They are not merely rebels for rebellion's sake. They are people driven by an inner conviction that something in the existing order is deeply flawed, and that silence in the face of that flaw is a betrayal of self. The power of defiance lies not in loud speeches or dramatic gestures, though those may sometimes be part of it. It lies in the unwavering decision to live by one's own principles, even when the entire weight of society urges compliance. A defiant person may be alone in their stance, yet their very existence poses a challenge to the system around them. They disrupt the illusion that everyone agrees, that the established way is the only way. To understand why defiance is so powerful, we must first consider what sustains any system, be it political, economic, or cultural. Systems survive not only through force or laws, but through the silent obedience of the majority. Most people, whether consciously or not, agree to follow the rules set before them. This collective compliance creates stability, predictability, and order. But it also makes the system fragile in a particular way. It depends on the assumption that dissent will be rare and manageable. When one person steps outside this unspoken agreement, they break the spell. Their refusal to conform is like a crack in a dam. It may start small, but it carries the potential to weaken the entire structure. Others who witness the act of defiance may begin to question their own compliance. They may start to wonder, if they can say no, why can't I? This possibility terrifies those in power, because it shows that obedience is not inevitable, it is a choice. Defiance is contagious. History offers countless examples. A single worker refusing unsafe conditions can inspire a strike. A lone protester in a public square can spark a movement. An artist rejecting censorship can embolden others to speak freely. In each case, the act of resistance is not only about the individual's personal freedom, it is about reshaping the imagination of everyone who sees it. The defiant person becomes a living symbol of autonomy, and symbols have a power that cannot be easily legislated away. Even if authorities punish or silence the dissenter, the memory of their courage lingers. The image of one person standing tall against overwhelming pressure is difficult to erase. It lodges itself in the minds of others, whispering that another path is possible. It is important to recognize that defiance does not always take the form of open confrontation. Sometimes it is subtle, a refusal to participate in a corrupt practice, a quiet act of kindness in a cruel environment, the deliberate choice to live by values that contradict the mainstream. These quiet forms of resistance may not make headlines, but they erode the foundations of unjust systems just as surely as mass protests do. What makes defiance so unsettling to the system is that it is rooted in an internal source of power. A person who draws strength from their own principles cannot be easily manipulated. Threats lose their sting when one has already accepted the risks of nonconformity. Bribes fail when one's sense of worth is not tied to material gain. Propaganda falls flat when one trusts their own judgment over the approved narrative. In this way, defiance represents a form of independence that is immune to many of the tools of control. And yet, defiance is not without cost. Those who choose this path often face isolation, ridicule, economic hardship, or worse. The system may seek to crush them as a warning to others. Friends may distance themselves out of fear or discomfort. The defiant person may find themselves standing in a vast and lonely space, with no guarantee that their actions will change anything. But the essence of true defiance is that it is not dependent on the likelihood of success. It is driven by the conviction that compliance is simply not an option. This is why the defiant figure inspires both fear and admiration. To the system, they are a threat to order. To the fearful, they are a reminder of their own chains. But to those who are ready to see, they are a beacon, a sign that courage is still possible, that human beings are not condemned to live as cogs in a machine. The power of defiance is, at its core, the power of the individual to affirm their humanity in the face of pressure to conform. It is the ability to look at an unjust rule and say, "This does not define me." It is the refusal to let fear dictate one's choices. And perhaps most importantly, it is the understanding that change, real, lasting change, often begins not with the many, but with the one. In the chapters that follow, we will explore why such individuals provoke such deep unease, and why systems of power will go to great lengths to suppress them. But for now, it is enough to recognize that the lone act of defiance is never truly alone. It carries within it the possibility of awakening others, of planting the seed of resistance, and of reshaping the future in ways that no one can fully predict. Every society, regardless of its political system or cultural identity, operates on an unspoken agreement between the governed and those who govern. This agreement is rarely written down or formally acknowledged, yet it is as real and binding as any law. It is the silent contract of society, a shared understanding that most people will follow the rules, respect the established order, and accept the authority that defines the boundaries of their lives. This contract begins to take shape early in life. From our first days in school, we are taught what is expected of us: to obey instructions, to stand in line, to raise our hands before speaking. These lessons are not merely about discipline. They are an introduction to the mechanics of social order. We learn that life flows more smoothly when we follow the rules, that those who comply are rewarded, and those who challenge authority face consequences. As we grow older, this understanding deepens. In workplaces, in public spaces, in civic life, we continue to honor the terms of this silent contract, sometimes consciously, but more often without thinking about it at all. We pay taxes, we obey traffic laws, we vote, or choose not to, within the accepted framework. We trust that the institutions around us, however flawed, provide a stable environment in which we can live our lives. In return for our compliance, the system offers certain benefits: safety, order, predictability. We know that streets will be patrolled, disputes will be mediated, and certain basic norms will be enforced. This stability is not without value. In fact, it is what allows complex societies to function. Without some level of collective agreement on rules and authority, chaos would quickly overtake cooperation. But there is a darker side to this arrangement. The same mechanisms that maintain order can also suppress change, and the same stability that protects can also imprison. Because the silent contract is rarely questioned, it becomes self-perpetuating. The more people comply, the harder it becomes for anyone to imagine alternatives. This is how conformity takes root, not only in our actions, but in our very imagination of what is possible. The fragility of the silent contract lies in its dependence on widespread acceptance. It assumes that dissent will remain minimal and isolated. If too many people begin to question the terms of the agreement, the entire structure can start to wobble. This is why systems often respond so harshly to even small acts of defiance. They fear the crack in the wall that might spread. Consider how this contract operates in subtle ways. A citizen may believe a law is unjust, but they will still obey it, reasoning that the cost of breaking it is too high. A worker may know their employer is exploiting them, yet remain silent to keep their job. A community may disapprove of a policy, but instead of organizing to resist, they adjust their expectations to fit the new reality. In each case, the choice to comply reinforces the system, even when it is not in the individual's best interest. The silent contract is enforced not only through formal penalties, but also through social pressure. Those who refuse to comply risk being ostracized, ridiculed, or labeled as troublemakers. Peer pressure becomes a powerful tool of control, often more effective than laws or police. When everyone around you accepts the terms of the agreement, breaking it feels like stepping into exile. Yet this contract is not inherently evil. It is, in many ways, a necessary foundation for cooperation. The problem arises when it becomes so rigid that it resists any change, no matter how justified. In such cases, the contract ceases to serve the people and instead serves only the preservation of the system itself. Those who challenge the silent contract, who openly refuse to comply with unjust rules, threaten more than the letter of the agreement. They threaten its psychological hold over the collective mind. By showing that compliance is not inevitable, they remind others that the contract is a choice, not a law of nature. The fear this provokes in the system is not unfounded. Once the idea takes root that the terms of the contract can be renegotiated or rejected entirely, the stability of the entire arrangement is at risk. What begins as one person's dissent can ripple outward, inspiring others to reconsider their own participation. In this way, the silent contract of society is both a source of strength and a potential point of collapse. It keeps order, but it can also trap us in outdated or unjust structures. It fosters cooperation, but it can also demand submission. And perhaps most dangerously, it can lull us into believing that the way things are is the way they must always be. Understanding this silent contract is crucial to understanding why defiance is so disruptive. It is not merely an act against a specific rule or authority. It is a direct challenge to the foundation upon which the entire social order rests. And for those invested in maintaining that order, such a challenge is something to be feared. Human beings are creatures of pattern. We build routines, cling to familiar habits, and seek stability in a world that is often chaotic. On both an individual and societal level, predictability provides comfort. It allows us to make plans, set expectations, and feel that we have some measure of control over our lives. But the same desire for stability that makes life manageable also shapes the way systems of power function. And it explains, in large part, why those who defy the rules inspire such fear. They disrupt the comfort of predictability. For those in power, predictability is not simply a convenience, it is a necessity. Governance, whether democratic or authoritarian, relies on the ability to anticipate how people will behave. If the majority can be counted on to follow laws, pay taxes, show up for work, and consume according to the expected patterns, the system runs smoothly. The moment those patterns begin to break, uncertainty seeps in. And uncertainty is dangerous to any structure built on control. The unpredictable individual is a living breach in the system's defenses. Unlike those who merely complain but still comply, the defiant person's actions cannot be forecast with any reliability. They might resist an unjust law, expose corruption, or inspire others to question authority. Because their decisions are rooted in personal conviction rather than imposed rules, they operate outside the normal channels of influence. The tools that usually ensure compliance, fear, reward, social pressure, become less effective. This unpredictability is deeply unsettling to the system because it undermines the carefully maintained illusion of order. The rules that govern society are supposed to apply to everyone. When someone refuses to play by them, it forces others to confront the uncomfortable truth. The rules only work as long as people agree to follow them. That realization can be contagious. It is not only institutions that fear unpredictability, communities and individuals often do as well. Predictable behavior makes people feel safe. When someone consistently acts in ways that defy social norms, it challenges not just the rules, but the shared expectations that knit a group together. Even friends and allies may react with suspicion or anxiety when faced with a person whose choices cannot be easily anticipated. Consider how this plays out in everyday life. A co-worker who refuses to participate in unethical practices may unsettle their peers, not because they are wrong, but because their refusal exposes the moral compromises others have accepted. A student who questions a teacher's authority might cause discomfort among classmates who have learned to stay silent. A citizen who refuses to obey an unjust law may be viewed as reckless, even by those who agree with them, because their defiance threatens to disturb the fragile equilibrium. Systems of power often attempt to eliminate unpredictability by codifying behavior. Laws, regulations, and social norms exist to make human action as foreseeable as possible. Even cultural narratives, stories, traditions, shared values play a role in shaping expectations. The ideal citizen, from the system's perspective, is one whose actions can be anticipated with near certainty. When someone steps outside this mold, the reaction is often swift and severe. They may be labeled dangerous, irrational, or extremist, not necessarily because their ideas are wrong, but because their behavior cannot be neatly slotted into existing categories. This is why whistleblowers, reformers, and nonconformists are so frequently met with hostility. They are variables in a system that depends on constants. The irony is that unpredictability is also the engine of change. Innovation, reform, and progress often come from those who are willing to act outside accepted patterns. If everyone behaved exactly as expected, societies would stagnate. Yet the same unpredictability that drives evolution is the very thing systems resist, because it threatens the stability they are designed to protect. On a psychological level, the fear of unpredictability is tied to the fear of loss. Loss of control, loss of stability, loss of the familiar. This fear can be so strong that people will cling to harmful systems rather than face the uncertainty of change. They will tolerate injustice, corruption, and inefficiency if those things are predictable, because at least they know how to navigate them. The unknown, by contrast, is a blank space in which anything could happen. Those who embrace unpredictability, who refuse to be bound by the expectations of the system, are often painted as dangerous precisely because they represent that blank space. They embody the possibility that the future might be radically different from the present. And for many, that possibility is as frightening as it is inspiring. Ultimately, the fear of unpredictability reveals a deep tension in human societies. We crave the comfort of stability, yet we need the disruption of the unexpected to grow. Systems of power tend to lean toward the former, seeking to suppress the latter. But history shows that no matter how tightly control is enforced, there will always be individuals who defy the script, who refuse to be predictable. And it is often those individuals, feared, resisted, and misunderstood, who shape the course of history in the most profound ways. When someone refuses to bow to the expectations of society, they often become more than just a rule breaker or a rebel. They become a mirror, a reflection of the choices others have made, the compromises they have accepted, and the truths they prefer to ignore. And for many, that reflection is deeply uncomfortable. This is one of the most underestimated reasons why defiant individuals provoke such hostility. They reveal, simply by existing, that conformity is not inevitable. Their presence reminds others that they too had a choice at some point, a choice they may have surrendered for safety, convenience, or acceptance. Confronted with that fact, people may feel guilt, shame, or resentment, emotions that are far easier to project outward than to examine inward. The mirror effect begins subtly. Perhaps you encounter someone who refuses to participate in an unethical practice at work. They make no speeches, they do not try to recruit allies, they simply refuse. Yet their quiet defiance becomes an implicit question to everyone else. Why are you going along with this? Even without words, the act exposes the gap between what people believe is right and what they are willing to do. This dynamic is not limited to workplaces. It plays out in schools, families, communities, and entire nations. The dissenter becomes a living contradiction to the narrative that this is just how things are. They show, through their refusal, that alternative paths exist. And once that awareness takes root, it becomes difficult to unsee. The discomfort intensifies when the defiant individual is someone we respect or relate to. If a stranger challenges the system, it's easy to dismiss them as naive, misguided, or reckless. But when it's a friend, a colleague, or a family member, the reflection hits closer to home. We cannot easily separate their courage from our own hesitation, and that comparison can sting. This is why dissenters are often met with personal attacks rather than reasoned debate. It is easier to label them arrogant, selfish, or unhinged than to engage with the uncomfortable truth they represent. By discrediting the mirror, we can avoid looking into it. Systems of power are well aware of this psychological reaction and often exploit it. Propaganda, social narratives, and even casual gossip are used to paint nonconformists as dangerous or ridiculous. The goal is to make the mirror so distorted that people no longer recognize themselves in it. If the dissenter can be made to seem alien, their reflection no longer feels relevant. Yet for all the hostility they face, the role of the uncomfortable mirror is crucial to societal growth. Without it, we drift deeper into complacency. We forget that the way things are is not the only way they could be. The mirror disrupts that forgetting. History offers countless examples of individuals who served as this kind of mirror. The whistleblower who exposes corruption, forcing a society to confront the rot in its institutions. The activist who refuses to accept discriminatory laws, revealing the cowardice of those who comply. The artist whose work challenges cultural norms, making people question values they took for granted. These figures are not always celebrated in their own time. Often, they are ridiculed or punished. But their reflections linger, haunting the collective conscience until change becomes unavoidable. The discomfort they cause is not a sign of their irrelevance, but of their impact. A mirror that only flatters teaches us nothing. A mirror that reveals our flaws gives us the opportunity to address them. This is why the system, and often the public, pushes back so fiercely against those who hold up the uncomfortable mirror, because it demands a reckoning. On a personal level, facing such a mirror can be transformative. It forces us to ask difficult questions. Am I living in alignment with my values? What compromises have I made and why? Do I accept injustice because resisting it feels risky, or because I have convinced myself that resistance is futile? These questions are not easy to sit with, and many would rather destroy the mirror than confront the answers. But destruction does not erase the truth, it only delays it. Eventually, the reflection returns, carried by someone else, in another time, under different circumstances. And each time it appears, more people may find the courage to look. The uncomfortable mirror is, in the end, not an enemy but a gift. It strips away the illusion that conformity is the same as morality, or that silence is the same as peace. It reminds us that the discomfort we feel is a sign of growth waiting to happen. And while the system may fear and resist it, the mirror remains, quietly reflecting, until enough of us are ready to face what we see. Freedom is a word that carries a halo. It is spoken with reverence, celebrated in songs and speeches, and enshrined in the founding documents of nations. It is painted as an unqualified good, something everyone wants, something worth fighting for. But behind the noble ideals lies a reality far less romantic. Freedom always has a cost, and it is a cost that few are truly willing to pay. At its core, freedom means the ability to live according to one's own values, to make choices unbound by the dictates of an external authority. But such autonomy comes with responsibilities that can be heavy to bear. It demands self-discipline, critical thinking, and a willingness to face the consequences of one's decisions. It requires standing apart from the crowd when the crowd moves in a direction you cannot follow. And often it means accepting isolation. For many, the idea of freedom is appealing precisely because they imagine it without its burdens. They envision the liberty to speak their minds without considering the backlash, to act according to conscience without enduring the material or social penalties. But the reality is that freedom frequently pits the individual against the system, and the system rarely surrenders without a fight. Throughout history, those who have pursued genuine freedom have paid dearly for it. Some have lost their livelihoods, others their reputations, many their lives. Whistleblowers are branded traitors, reformers are exiled, and dissidents are imprisoned. Even in societies that claim to cherish freedom, the social cost of dissent can be crushing. Friendships strain, families fracture, and communities turn their backs on those who refuse to conform. One of the hidden prices of freedom is uncertainty. When you choose to live by your own compass rather than the map handed to you, the path ahead is rarely clear. Systems offer predictability. Follow the rules, and you know what to expect. Reject the rules, and you step into a landscape with no guarantees. The security of the known is replaced by the risk of the unknown, and that risk can be terrifying. Another cost is the constant need for vigilance. Freedom is not something that, once gained, remains secure forever. It must be guarded against erosion, sometimes by external forces seeking control, and sometimes by our own willingness to trade liberty for comfort. This vigilance requires energy, awareness, and a refusal to become complacent, even when life feels stable. Freedom also challenges relationships. When one person claims the right to think and act independently, it can unsettle those around them. Friends may interpret it as arrogance, colleagues as insubordination, loved ones as a rejection of shared values. The person who chooses freedom must be prepared for the possibility that others will walk away, unable or unwilling to accept their refusal to conform. And yet, for those who embrace it fully, the rewards of freedom outweigh its costs. The ability to live authentically, to align one's actions with one's beliefs, to speak truth without self-censorship, to choose one's own path, is worth the sacrifices it demands. Freedom may isolate you from the majority, but it connects you to the deepest parts of yourself. It strips away the false comfort of conformity and replaces it with the hard, unshakable comfort of integrity. The price of freedom is not paid all at once. It is paid daily, in small acts of courage and resistance. It is paid in the decision to question rather than accept, to act rather than comply, to remain true to yourself even when doing so costs you approval, security, or peace of mind. And it is a price that must be paid willingly. No one can force freedom upon you, just as no one can truly take it away if you refuse to surrender it. We often speak of freedom as though it is a gift bestowed by governments or won in a single historic moment. But in truth, it is a practice, a way of living that requires constant reaffirmation. It is not for the faint-hearted. It is for those willing to bear the weight of its demands, to stand apart when standing apart feels lonely, and to accept the uncertainty of the open road. The irony is that while the cost of freedom can be high, the cost of its absence is often higher still. A life lived in submission may offer comfort, but it comes at the price of selfhood. To live without freedom is to live without the ability to fully claim your own life as your own. The comforts of safety, predictability, and acceptance lose their value when purchased at the expense of the soul. In the end, the price of freedom is the same as the price of becoming fully human. The willingness to accept responsibility for your life, in all its uncertainty, risk, and consequence. It is not the easy path, but it is the only one that leads to a life that is truly yours. And for those who have tasted it, no price is too great to pay.